All right, teammates. We are back once again. If this is your first time listening to the Move Swiftly podcast, welcome to the number one show on innovative teamwork. Great to have you. Looking forward to having you back for more. To my regular listeners, you already know what it's about here, man. You hit that play button and nothing but great things happen for you. Nothing but possibilities. Things start to become possible when you hit the play button here because you start realizing life isn't just an individual game, it's all about teamwork. So, excuse me. Today I have Miss Carly Pepin, a human behavior specialist, who is going to talk a lot about just getting clarity on exactly what it is you want to do, dealing and blocking out the noise and learning how to start trusting your own instincts. So, all that being said, Carly, welcome to the show. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here, and I'm really excited to get into this conversation today because things didn't, whenever we have someone who is kind of the mindset of teaching clarity, of the mindset of maybe kind of around the life coaching aspect and helping people behave in a certain way, we always got to hear your background and how you were able to get to this point. And I was listening to it. I don't want to spoil it for the listeners, but you had a situation where you were going through what I guess you considered a midlife crisis, and you decided, hey, I'm just gonna pick up in, is it Australia you decided to go to? So
Yes.
talk a little bit about, I guess, talk a little bit about your background and what how you grew up and all that, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Yeah. So I grew up in a family of entrepreneurs, which was, it was fun. It was different, inspiring. And I don't think there was like one family member who had a job.
Are you
So
serious?
whenever,
All
yeah,
of
so
them? So
whenever
was it like an older sibling or younger? Like how was? Were you the youngest?
No, so I have a younger brother. He's actually 13 years younger, so it's a
Oh,
significant difference. But my mom and dad were both entrepreneurs. My
mhm,
dad had his own company in the film industry. My mom, she was a travel agent, but she had built her business from home. So she was like stay at home, work from home mom.
mhm.
And then my grandma had her own restaurant. My aunt worked there, my great grandma worked there, and my other aunt, she had a what would it be considered? It was like in also for the film industry, but they were doing like stunts with like helicopters and planes and stuff because my
Right.
uncle was a pilot. So I kind of grew up in an environment wherever someone was like babysitting me, I would be just at their work, which was just different businesses. So that was
Right.
inspiring. So it kind of was like a normal for me to see just people running their own businesses, families working together, and that was really inspiring for me. So I
Now,
absolutely, yeah, I love that.
as you look back on it, though, what were some of the things that you saw that may have been a challenge to someone growing up and not really understanding what
Mhm.
entrepreneurship is all about? Because, like you too, I didn't have a whole. I joke around. It wasn't everyone wasn't an entrepreneur, but my dad had his own business. My mother was very focused, and my sister's had a job since she was 13 years old and has not been without a job since. This is over 30 years, right?
Mhm.
And I would tell people all the time, one room was Nike, the other one was Under Armour, the other one was Reebok. And it was always people kind of working. And there would be times where it wasn't it'd be like a business environment. So as you look back on it now, do you see any challenges in having being in a household where it was such a hyper focus on business, or was
Mhm.
that sort of something different?
I think that just basically depends on anyone's perception, and this is where, I mean, this is a great intro to our perceptions, right?
What you
So
on the
our
number
per
one show
yeah.
page? Innovative teamwork. This is what we do, girl. We keep it all the way 1,000.
Ah, so everyone's going to have a different perception and they're going to have different challenges and charges based on growing
Mhm,
up in that environment. Like I've worked with a lot of clients who have had, my dad, since he was in the film industry, sometimes he would be gone for 3 months at a time.
mhm.
There's really late nights. Sometimes there's 16-hour days that they're working.
Yeah,
And so, you just see him kind of he sneaks in at night like to go to bed and I go into the
mhm,
bathroom and I wake up and I see him and then he's out the door by four or
yeah,
five in the morning, right?
right.
So sometimes, and I've worked with individuals who have been quite triggered by a situation like that, where they perceive
Gotcha.
theres a level of abandonment, is the label.
Yeah,
I didn't have that perception. I remember looking back and thinking, when I started to do this work, I was like, am I mad at my dad? And I was like, no. I was like, I didn't actually perceive that.
I
Yeah,
I know
so
exactly
this
what
is
you mean because you
perception.
you just don't know because as kids it's the norm. And you're right.
Yeah.
When you meet other people, and this is why I'm so pumped to have you on, because when you meet other people, your worldview starts to broaden when you realize, hey, I'm not the only one that thinks like that. So let me not be selfish and think my way of thinking is the only way of thinking, and connecting with
Mhm.
other people. And that's kind of where we can lead, where we can create a lot of solutions to the problems that we see now. So
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because it's like those perceptions that really shape the relationships that you have in the future. You know,
mhm,
so it's like the clients that I've worked with that have felt abandoned by particular parents who have had that busyness. They have felt abandoned, they've felt hurt, they've felt rejected, and that
right,
has stayed with them for decades until we actually go through and do the work to clear it. I
right,
didn't have that experience just because I didn't have that perception. And it
right,
kind of shows you the power of perception. So I wasn't mad at my dad. I didn't feel, like I said, abandoned by him or hurt by him or wronged by him. It was just like, oh, that's normal. That's just what life looks like, right?
right.
That's just and that's okay. And I
Mhm.
still felt connected with him. And it's funny because I could even see like even though he worked so hard, we still had moments of connection,
Yeah,
and I was totally aware of it, where, like I said, there's other individuals with perceptions that wasn't present. And this is why the power of our perceptions is so important, because if we have a story that we tell ourselves. Sometimes it's interesting. I remember working with a client who said their sister was the worst. They're like, my
mhm,
sister's the worst person on the planet.
right,
And he's going off on it, like on a tangent. And I was like, well, there has to be some good qualities. They're trying to work on the challenges he has with his sister, obviously. And I'm like,
right,
okay. I was like, let's reframe. I was like, you said your sister's married and she has kids. And I was like, how long she been married for? 25 years. And I was like, well, she can't be all that bad.
yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah,
25 years. And I was
right,
like, and you said her kids were over 18 and they still live at home. And he's
right,
like, they're in their 20s. And I was like, well, again, she can't be all that bad. Like they
right,
have a choice to leave. And you could see him just soften a little bit in
exactly,
that moment, just asking some questions where it's like, let's actually reflect. Like every person has challenging qualities, but they also have really supportive qualities. Sometimes when we're highly resentful, we choose to hold on to the perception that someone's only challenging, they're only negative. And what we wind up doing is we actually block kind of the beauty that, you know, we forgot about, like when you first connected with this person. And so
mhm,
that's why it's really important to shift our perceptions, make sure we're clearing that resentment so that we give ourselves the opportunity to really connect with people that are important to us. I just did this with a client as well, and this was a few years ago, where she had built up some resentment to dad because of some really intense challenges they had gone through as a
right,
kid, right? These are like, big traumatic
exactly,
stuff, right?
exactly, yeah,
And when we had done the work and cleared, it wound up that her father passed away only a couple months later. And I got an email to her and she said, thank you. She said, you have no idea what that work meant, because I didn't know I had such little time left with him. And as a result, I just got to hang out with him a little bit.
yes,
So it's like that's the importance of it, is sometimes we act like we're going to live forever and we
mhm.
don't think that we need to start to work on this stuff now. But the truth is that we're not going to live forever. And so, yeah, if something's important to you, if you're important to yourself, let's clear that
Well,
frustration.
I can't tell you how much I appreciate you sharing that, and being so transparent as you are, because you're right. That resentment is like poison. Having that
Mhm.
resentment towards anything and anybody can absolutely rip you up inside, and it does nothing for you. And I have to ask you now, because I teach at a school, and even just today, look, there's certain kids that just behavior wise, and I'm glad I'm talking to a behavior specialist. I'm using the word, I'm using the word very intentionally when it comes to this, because I want you to kind of test on how I was able to manage this situation. Their behavior was horrific, Carly, and I lost it on them. I screamed at them, and hey, be quiet. But at the same time, I didn't go too far, because I know every one of their parental situations. Some of the kids have been molested by that. Some of the kids are going through broken homes, blended families, all of that. And before I got to the, like I used to be, before I got to the point where I was like absolutely losing it on them, I slowed myself down, created a fun game, and we ended the day went on a good note. And I
Hmm.
got to ask you now, when it comes to how school was for you, when you look back on it
Hmm.
now, and before you had your, I guess it was like in your 20s where you had your hiatus and decided you were just going to pick up and go to Australia. What was school like during those years? And, kind of talk us through what, as you look back on it now, what it was like, and how things were going for you when it comes to meeting peers and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I would say, similar to other people, I've had a multifaceted experience of school. every single person on this planet has been bullied, but let's be transparent. We've also all been the bully. And
Yeah.
so we've done both sides. And so I've had experiences of being both sides as well, right? On
Really.
both ends of the spectrum. Oh, for
Now,
sure.
when you say bully, though, and I want to make sure because I actually have a chapter in my book titled "Teachers or Bullies."
Hmm.
Teachers and bullies, because I was actually physically assaulted by teachers when I was in high school.
Hmm.
But bullies also are in the form of it doesn't have to be physical. It could be
Hmm.
a mental bully, someone that's mentally abusing you and things like that. So
Hmm. Yeah, so it was more the mental stuff, right? So more the mental stuff with me. And this is where I say, like, we all have both these sides. Like, I've been on the receiving end, but I've also been on the giving end because I don't want to deny that we all have that part of ourselves within us, right? Like, I've been the person who has had someone who's shared things that were mentally challenging to me, right? But I mean, we've all done that to someone else, where we've been that person who has
right.
been mentally challenging to someone else. And someone else on this planet is labeling us as a bully as well. So
Wow.
again, this is where we want to be careful, where when we put labels on things, we want to also understand like why we're bringing it in and why we're attracting it. So the biggest thing for me when I experienced the bullying is that I was a very quiet person, like very quiet and very reserved and very scared. And I just was terrified to like speak up. This was just me, right? Like Carly in the world back then is not Carly in the world today.
Carly is on a podcast, folks. She just said what
Carly's,
she said, and she is on a been
you've
has been
no
on
idea how many,
multiple
yeah.
podcasts. So
So
hey,
many podcasts. We're almost up to 100 now. They just haven't been released yet.
but look
Um,
at you. All
so it's
right.
hysterical. But those bullies are the ones who got me to use my voice, right? Like
Wow.
finally, like I got so frustrated. I started to speak up. I started to understand where my power was at and how to manage it and how to utilize it, right?
Hmm.
Like they're the ones that got me to speak up. They're the ones that I used my voice as a result of because I got so frustrated and so fed up. And then I started to learn how to stand up for myself and I got more creative and I totally got the human behavior for sure. I
Right.
remember a sticky situation where I almost someone was definitely threatening to basically beat me up, but I had gotten out of it using my words in a very creative way. And I walked away and I was like, I could do that again, you know? But again, that only
Yeah.
came as a result of having that particular challenge. And so I'm very grateful for those individuals. Like I'm grateful for the opportunity that they've given me to come into myself in such a way that now I don't have to be afraid of speaking. You know, I don't have to be afraid of being confrontational. They've given
Yeah.
me creative ways to resolve conflict, or sometimes just be the person who's like, oh, not in the mood. Like, I'm gonna blow up on you today too. Like, it's just one of those days. Yeah.
Yeah. That's
So it's just
amazing.
like,
Yeah,
yeah,
that
embrace
is
all parts of
amazing because
yourself.
I mean, listen, when you're an easy target, when you again you
Yeah.
have ambition and like you mentioned, you were around entrepreneurs. Obviously, some of what they had in terms of their mindset was rubbing off on you. And
Hmm.
with entrepreneurs, one of the difficult things about being an entrepreneur is that we are easy targets. It is easy to
Hmm.
slice and dice everything we do. It's easy to criticize our work. It's easy because we lie to ourselves all the time. We try to figure stuff out,
Hmm.
and it's very easy to be criticized. So you need to have thick skin. You need to have alligator skin, and it gets to the point where, look, at some point you have to speak up for yourself. You don't get to be the quiet entrepreneur. There's no such thing. It's like an oxymoron. You have to speak up for yourself, and you have to get to a situation
Hmm.
where you're at least on the right on the you have to be doing something that you believe in so strongly that it will force you to speak up for yourself. So, I
For
bring all that
sure.
up because, yeah, like I said, I bring all that up because I was listening, like I said, I was listening to you on other shows, and you got to a point where you had to just make a trip. So, to give you some context, how I got to Florida was about 7 years ago now, and my dad bought another car, and I was able to get his 20-year-old Benz that didn't have any radio, didn't have anything, but I was young enough to make the move to Florida. So I drove from Maryland to Florida and just started. Started a brand new life. And you had a similar situation where you were, kind of got out of your comfort zone. You moved somewhere where you didn't know anyone and you had to figure it out. But then, well, I'll let you tell it. But then you realize, hey, when you got there, it's actually the inner work that needs to be done. So, kind of speak on that a little bit.
Yeah, so basically there was a time and it was my late 20s and I was almost 30 and I just was very depressed and I was very upset and I thought it was
So
Los
what was it? Was it
Angeles.
just job situation? Just like things
I
not
had a
going right?
very cool job. Like it was a killer job. It
Oh
was
yeah,
so
yeah, yeah, yeah.
fun.
Just, yeah, yeah. You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you were like, what was it? Well, just
I was working in the fashion industry for
mhm,
a photographer, and
right.
I was managing the studio, I was
Mhm,
managing him as an artist, and then I also got to do creative direction with him. And
yeah.
I will say we actually worked really well together, like
Mhm,
really, really well. And yeah, he's one person that I just had an amazing time collaborating with.
mhm,
And I just wasn't okay in myself.
mm.
And I didn't understand about personal development. I didn't know about how to sort that out. And so I made an assumption that it must be the job because it's the fashion industry and it's stressful and there's all these deadlines and like there's all these
Outside, right? Yeah,
personalities.
the exterior
There's
factor.
celebrities
Right, yeah,
too.
yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting celebrity stories
Mhm. Uh-huh.
sometimes.
Yeah, I could. You
Um,
were meeting a bunch of different ones, so I could only imagine what. Because when you
yeah,
find out the real about how these celebrities really live,
for
I,
sure.
oh
For
man,
sure.
creepy.
So you're dealing with all these different dynamics
Right.
and personalities and challenges that come with it. And I made the assumption that as a result of this, like this dynamic, living in the city, and it just, that was it. It was like, it's LA, right? It must be LA. And
Right.
so I chose to move out of the country to Australia. That seemed like the smartest idea at the time. And when I got there and everything was gone, all the noise was gone. And as
Mhm.
soon as all the noise was gone, I felt worse. And it took me probably like a week for it to really hit me to realize like it had nothing to do with all this stuff that I had blamed, but it had to do with everything on the inside. And that's when I realized like I almost actually went home and someone said, just stay, push it out, like you've got this, right? Really wise woman, super grateful for her.
Mhm.
And then I did stay, wound up finding my first coach who helped me. She was a human behavior specialist. And we kind of did things in a different way.
Mhm.
And as a result, my life started to transform. I started to transform. I felt the transformation first, and then everything on the outside kind of started to fall into place for me, right? Like just started to open up. And that's when I decided to stay for the entire year in Australia, but I just kept pursuing the personal development. It's also when I decided to be a coach after about 3 months of working with her. The
Mhm.
transformation for me was so massive. Like I had just been living in misery for so long, you know? And like in 3 months, I was feeling so much better. And I was like, sign me up, girl.
So walk us through the day in which you started to notice a change in yourself. Because what you said is very
Yeah.
powerful. Because again, you make this move and now you really don't know anyone. You don't have a job to cling
Mhm.
to. You don't have any real situation in which you can look to externally and say, okay, I can cling on to it. It's all you. You got to figure the shit out. And
Mhm.
when it comes to the day where you started realizing, if you can remember, can you kind of walk us through that day so listeners know, hey, this is changing in me. This personal and professional development is changing. This is working, things like that.
Mhm. Yeah, so we first started just by understanding like what my unique purpose was and what was valuable to me, basically the deeper why behind my life. I will say that it was a lot more vague back then, but it was enough details that she just looked at me and she was like, I just want every day, I want you to do 3 things that
Mm,
would actually align you with this. And I was like, that's it. And she goes, that's it. And then I started to do it, and my life really started to change because when we're doing things that are meaningful to us and purposeful to us, we feel more purposeful. And
mhm,
then, even though I'm still having challenges in my life, I'm at least having challenges and things that are inspiring to me. And that's when I really started to understand and learn. And this is something that I love helping people with now is like, let's understand your deeper whys. Let's understand what's important to you, what's so valuable to you that no matter what's going on in your life, you're going to move forward into it through pleasure and pain, right? Like this is the most important dynamic. And because as a result of that, it's going to give you the opportunity to make sure that you're going to go through not just supportive moments, but also challenging moments and still feel that purpose within. And
mm,
that is so important. And that's when, like, those were the moments in the very beginning that I started to feel that and realize that. And I also had something to stand up for that was like valuable to me
mhm,
even though I was getting rejected by certain individuals, like on certain things they didn't believe in or they didn't agree with me, and some of them were quite harsh. But at the same time, it was like I remember it was the first time where I was like, you know what, this is important to me. I'm going
mhm,
to stand my ground on this one, and I'm going to move forward. And I hadn't really had that for
Hmm.
quite some time. So it really reconnected with like what was valuable, what was my life, and what inspired me. And
Hmm.
again, it's just, I mean, I talk about this in like every podcast is find
Right.
out what's that why for you and make sure every day you're implementing those things. And that immediately will give you a massive transformation in your life. You'll already start to feel more fulfilled.
Well, wow. Well,
Mhm.
first of all, appreciate you sharing that. And I do have to re-emphasize because I don't want it to get brushed over, is the measurable and attainable goals. Your coach just said three things, not 300. All right.
Mhm.
Three things that you can accomplish to date. And that's how things get done. But you have to do it every single day. It has to be
Mhm.
something that you commit to doing, and you cannot take any days off. It's just something that's attainable, and you'll start to see yourself, you start to feel yourself growing every single moment when you do these attainable goals. So you had already mentioned this when it came to you developing personally. Now, eventually decide you wanted to become a coach and help other people as
Mhm.
well. What was that transition like? Like, did you just automatically hide, like, just cold turkey? I'm done with the fashion industry, and now I'm going to
Mhm.
be a coach. Or how did that? How did you like kind of decide to build a business around becoming a coach?
Yeah. So I did buy into the entrepreneur fantasy that were sold that, you can make all this money overnight, and that's not true. So I did quit my job.
It is not true. So what?
Um,
You actually had a job out in Australia, or were you still
Yeah,
doing?
I had like this part-time gig that I was doing for a different company where I could
Okay.
actually work online. So this is a long time ago, but they were
Okay.
still having me work online.
Mhm.
When I came back to the States, I did quit my job. I bought into the fantasy, which
Mhm.
by the way, it's a huge fantasy that businesses are built overnight. So I learned pretty quickly that they're not. After about 2 years, I wound up having an opportunity to go back to that position and work part-time. And so I did do that. So after 2 years, I went back to that position, started to work part-time because I did drain my savings. So this is also really important to remember as well when people think about entrepreneurship.
Mhm.
When someone sells you like a get rich quick and like overnight, like, ooh, you're gonna make 50 grand in your first month, like that's not gonna happen.
Oh
Like
yeah,
it takes a,
yeah, I mean
it's not
you are
gonna
one
happen.
of many people that have been on this show that have been burned by that same thing. So it's
Yeah.
kind of a
I'm super,
relevant
yeah.
thing, around
It's so
here.
funny. And we all kind of fall for it in the beginning, and
Mhm.
it's okay, it's fair. But at the same
Yeah,
time,
it's
like if
part
you're
of the
listening,
process, right? Mhm.
hold on to your savings, stick with
Mhm.
your job because there's a lot that we can do. And like I said, I started to work with them part-time, and then I started to be able to build my business while having that financial security and building my wealth. And that also changed how I felt about building my business and how I felt about myself, increasing your confidence, your self-esteem, your self-worth. So that was really inspiring. And after that, I just kept going and going and going until it was like, okay, cool. Like I don't actually have to do this anymore. And that was an inspiring transition as well. Yeah,
Now,
but I
how do
definitely
you
waited.
how do you get to your and I hate to use the word ideal client here because you can help a
Yeah.
lot of different people, but how do you sort of get to the person that you're targeting when it comes to specifically the work you're doing? Because you and I know it's hard to get people to open up. It's hard to get people to
Mm.
trust folks who are going to be telling them there's some personal stories, there's some things that you don't just trust. How were you able to get it to where now you're the right person is being drawn to, the right client is being drawn to you?
Yeah, so in the beginning, and I would definitely suggest this for people because we're going to be really unclear on what our ideal client is. Not sometimes we're super clear, by the way. Sometimes we're very clear. Like sometimes we have a very specific product, very specific, and we know exactly who we're going to. Like I have a friend who's doing some dental stuff, right? And she's like, do you know any dentists I can talk to, Carly? And I was like, 100%. But she's literally working in the dental industry
Yeah.
on a dental product.
Yeah,
So that's when we're clear.
that's specific, right?
Yeah, when we're doing coaching or consulting, sometimes it can be a little bit different and we're not always as clear. What I found
And then
to,
there's also corporate. You love business, so there's also
oh, I
corporate
love
you
business.
can get. You can do
Yeah,
for a whole company. Then there may be an individual CEO. So it's a lot of things
there's a
that
lot of
a lot of different things
dynamics.
go away, right?
Yeah, and I think what was really interesting in the beginning, because and you guys could take these tests again, you guys are gonna have a laugh at it. So most of the tests to find your ideal client, you're gonna answer the questions. And if you actually look at it, I did it the third time I did it, I just looked at it and I was like, every single time it's just asking me questions that are describing me in this
Hmm.
period of life. And I was like, that's weird. I'm like, that's just weird now. So basically there's these ideal client profiles are kind of created to basically answer questions that make you pick people that are just like you. And the reality is our ideal client is not like they'll have similar challenges, but they're not you, right? They're not you. They're a completely different entity and a completely different purpose, or excuse me, person. When you think about your ideal client, you want to really focus on what are their goals? What are they inspired to like achieve, right? Is it one specific goal in a particular area of life? Is it goals in multiple areas of life? What are the things that keep them awake at night, right?
Yeah.
What are the things that make them not be able to sleep?
Mm-hmm.
And I definitely suggest if you're in coaching and consulting,
Mm-hmm.
going out there, getting your feet wet, and having some clients to get started with. Because
Yeah.
the best way for me, when I've really gotten more and more specific on who that client is I go back to my consulting sessions and I think which are the clients where I'm on a session and I feel like an open heart. Like I am so inspired and grateful by that session. I'm like, what are we doing? What are we talking about? What's
Yeah.
the commonality behind it? And
Mm-hmm.
when I go through all of my sessions like that, I'm like, ooh, wow, this is a very specific type of individual, right? A very specific. And then once you have that data, it's easy to talk to them,
Yes, man.
right? Now you know
Yes.
exactly who you're talking to, right? You
Yeah.
know what they're desiring, you know what they want to work through, you know what they're like, again, what's keeping them up at night. And you're, because it's less for me, like, I'm not, you have to be a certain age or a certain, like male or female. Like,
Right.
I really don't care. I've worked with kids as young as 7, and I've worked with individuals all the way up into their 80s. Like, I do
Yeah.
not care how old you are.
Mm-hmm.
If you are an inspiring individual to work with, and these are some things that you'd love to connect on and work through, I would love to do it with you,
Yes.
right? And so sometimes we can really like, and sometimes it's what we want, where it's like I work with 20s to 30s and only in relationships, and that's your target market. But yeah, identifying it and making sure you understand, and if that's what opens your heart, go for it. But
Mm-hmm.
making sure that you know what that is. And another thing too is like, when we build businesses, it's easy to focus on the money, right? Because we all want to make money from our business.
Exactly.
But it's really important that we focus on the people, right? Because the people they'll give you referrals. They'll help you create more income. They'll help you build your business if you get them results. Like
Right.
that's just it, like, and there's so many coaches and stuff, and they're just all talking about money, 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 and high ticket clients. And
Yep.
it's almost like you take the human aspect away from a client and a person. But at the end of that, like a high ticket client is like, to me, a high ticket client isn't someone who's really rich and easy to sell. Like, by the way, rich people are not easy to sell. Like they protect their money.
They're rich for a
They
reason. They're rich
they're
for
rich for a
or
reason and they're
right.
not gullible and they're going to ask you a lot of questions. And if you don't deliver, you're going to give them their money back
Mm,
100%. And so
exactly.
it's like a high ticket client, which is funny because people sort of just label it as a rich person. And then you're like targeting someone, which is a little bit uncomfortable because
Mhm.
they have money. And now you're not even connected to them. And you wonder why you didn't get the client.
If
Like,
you lock
because you,
far into that, right?
yeah, you don't even care enough about them to understand them or know who they are. So if you're really just connecting with people, find
Mhm.
out what their needs are, find out what they would love to do. And if you're the provider and you have certainty you can provide that for them, you care enough to sell them, care enough to sell them, and then provide them that service. And when you give them a great product and a great service and you help them,
Mhm.
they will want to sing your praises. They will want to refer you. They will want to come back. And that was the biggest lesson I definitely learned as well. Because again, there's all this stuff with entrepreneurship where it's telling you
Right.
how to do this and how to make more money. And when I stopped focusing on the money and started focusing on the people and the service, I started to make more money
Yes.
because I cared.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's actually as the saying goes,
Uh,
it's people over profits, and so much of that is also involves listening very intently. Like as you were talking, I was thinking back to my days when I was a front desk associate at a gym, and I would see the personal trainers as the clients were giving them their goals, and they would just be quiet, mouth quiet, listening, taking notes, knowing exactly what
mhm,
they were trying to get their goals to be. And I looked over to another one of the colleagues. I'm like, man, those trainers, they listen. He goes, yep. You want to get clients, you better
mhm.
be doing exactly that. It can't be about just profits. You have got to care about people's goals and exactly what it is they want to do. So, all that being said, I do want to be very respectful of your time. Can you just tell people a little bit about what's next for your business, how they can get in touch with you if they want to get involved, kind of put all that stuff out there now?
Yeah, so business-wise, so I work with a lot of business owners, executives, CEOs, entrepreneurs. I do all this personal development dynamic, but I also do help them scale up their businesses. So we definitely focus on the people and the service, but I'll even get into the crux of things to help them also understand the profits to make sure that they're basically cash flow rich, right? So we don't actually want to focus on profits in general. We want to make sure that their overall cash flow is doing really well. And we utilize like understanding their own people, understanding their strategy, understanding the execution and the cash as well. So not only do I do the personal development stuff, but we really do a deep dive into business to make sure that you can scale it up to the degree that you would love to and that you're inspired to.
Mhm.
So that is what I'm up to, and I love doing that. I love helping people get
Right.
their services out in the world who want to
Okay.
make an impact, not just in other people's lives, but also in their
No,
own.
well, I think I'm laughing because your face is
Mm.
like lighting up as you're saying that. And
Yeah.
you can tell it's from the heart. And I'm not sure if you guys listening to this on audio or if you're visibly looking, you probably notice the same thing. Her face is absolutely lighting up. It's like a glare in her eyes. And I just love seeing that. And you could tell you've helped people before. You could tell you've actually done it because the smile is like planted on your face. So I love seeing that because it's authentic. And what we do here on the show, I don't just let anyone on the show. We make sure everything is as authentic as humanly possible. So when can how many excuse me, how can people get in touch with you? Where do you normally send them when you want them to get in touch with you?
Yeah, so they can go to my website, which is westcoast-ga.com.
westcoast-ga.com, and that will also
Yep.
be included in the show notes as well. So the Carly, the final thing I do to close out all the shows is I want you to use your imagination a little bit. You are the young teenage girl. You're either being the bully or getting bullied. You're debilitatingly shy. You don't want to speak up for yourself. Pretend that that version of Carly has come into the Zoom room. Give her some words of encouragement, and we will officially close.
Yeah, so you can't see it yet, but everything is perfectly on the way for you. And I can't wait for you to actually see it.
That was heartfelt. That was heartfelt. I felt it in your voice. That was incredibly heartfelt. Again, appreciate the work you're doing and appreciate you coming on. It's again, you listeners, listen. You guys, especially the regular ones, you guys already know what this show is about. I will not be stopping. It's a number one show on innovative teamwork for a reason. It is comes out every single day. A new episode comes out every single day. We are not stopping. No plans on stopping anytime soon. So, all that being said, fellow teammates, continue to move swiftly. We will talk more soon.